sometimes nothing happens for decades. Sometimes decades happen in a matter of weeks. I think that's where we are right now. Who would have thunk it? Bashar Assad crumbling before terrorist rebels in a matter of days, taking over the country, driving Assad out. He's reportedly in Moscow seeking asylum, although there's no independent footage verifying that. There was an allegation that as he attempted to escape, his Russian airplane was shot down. That's quite a possibility. It was incredible how quickly the end came. Of course, Assad was strengthened in power for years by Russia, which deployed its air power in Syria unopposed by the rebels. The rebels did do brutal damage, but Russia was able to hold them off. Russia also using Syria as a port for the naval vessels. Well, they pulled out in a hurry, taking their military equipment with them. They weren't foolish enough, like Joe Biden was, to leave billions of dollars worth of equipment behind for the terrorists. And when I say terrorists, that's exactly what I mean. The new leader of Syria, if you can call a warlord a leader, is named Al-Jolani. That's not his real name. That's an Arabic way of saying the Golan Heights, Julani, Golani. That's the mountain range between Syria, Lebanon, and Israel. And it was the site of a major battle in 1973 between Syria and Israel. The fact that this terrorist has named himself after those border mountains is somewhat disconcerting, suggesting he has bigger ambitions than just conquering and ruling Syria. I should tell you that he has a resume that would be the star of any Al-Qaeda LinkedIn. In fact, he was a deputy in Al-Qaeda. He was a deputy in ISIS. He worked for al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, before Trump killed him. In fact, here's a picture published by the U.S. Diplomatic Corps a few years ago, offering $10 million for the capture of Al-Jolani. Now we're supposed to take him as a world leader. He is a terrorist who perhaps will turn Syria into even more of a terrorist state. It reminds me of this astonishing newspaper article that praised Osama bin Laden as a man who was taking his army and dedicating them to peace. This was after Osama bin Laden's war against the Soviets in Afghanistan. Little did they know that he would go on to become the mastermind of 9/11. I can understand why there was jubilation, though, that someone, anyone at all, had dethroned Bashar Assad and his family. Bashar Assad took over from his father, Hafez Assad, both of them brutal. In the case of his father, Hafez, there was the story of the city of Hama, not to be confused with Hamas, but a city called Hama, where rebels once gathered. Hafez Assad, the father, sealed off the city and for days and days just fired artillery into the place, killing an estimated 40,000 of his own citizens. And of course, the United Nations had nothing to say about that. Bashar learned his cruelty at his father's hand, his father's side. Although Bashar had cultivated a Western image of sophistication, and he wore Western clothing, and he attended school in the UK. He became an ophthalmologist. His wife was in a Vogue fashion spread. He was normalized. Here's a picture of John Kerry meeting with him. Here's a picture of Nancy Pelosi meeting with him. He was the delight of the Democrats, which is odd because they now accuse the Republican Tulsi Gabbard of being a Russian agent for having similar ideas that perhaps Assad could be turned towards the West. If I had to compare Assad to other leaders in the region, I would compare him to two other leaders that were deposed by Western-backed forces. Saddam Hussein of Iraq, who was deposed directly by the United States, and Muammar Gaddafi of Libya, who was deposed by rebels. In both cases, in all three cases, that is, the men were butchers, absolutely brutal. We're seeing images now of some prisons, including underground prisons, where people were kept in atrocious conditions, some of them born in the prisons and never having let out of it. Absolute atrocities, crimes against humanity. Absolutely, Saddam Hussein with his rape rooms, Gaddafi. But all three of those tyrants did have something to offer, I suppose, which is they were a gate barred against the sheer chaos and brutality that was to come. What happened with the deposing of Gaddafi was the growth of the Islamic State and the re-emergence of open-air slave markets and the mass migration from North Africa and the Middle East into Europe. Muammar Gaddafi was an awful man, but actually towards the end of his career, he attempted to make amends, paying more than $1 billion to victims of his own terrorism, giving up his weapons of mass destruction program, and pledging to become part of the West. It was Hillary Clinton who had him killed and then joked about it. Remember this?
Unconfirmed.
Unconfirmed. Yeah.
Unconfirmed.
No. Unconfirmed reports about Gaddafi being captured.
Oh, really?
Unconfirmed. Yeah. We've had too many. We've had a bunch of those before. We've had, have had him captured a couple of times.
Unconfirmed reports.
Yes, we came, we saw, he died.
Did it have anything to do with your visit?
No, I'm sure it did.
Saddam Hussein was awful as well, but he kept a lid on things on Iraq. Now it is mayhem, a colony of Iran and all sorts of Islamists. Bashar al-Assad held back things we don't quite yet know what they'll come. There is a Christian population in Syria. It's obviously been in decline as the Christian population throughout the Arab world is. Lebanon used to be majority Christian. Christians have been fleeing that country. Even places like Iraq used to have a significant Christian population. There is no safe place in the Middle East for Christians. They despise Jews, but they don't have much time for Christians either. There's a slow ethnic cleansing. You might find it hard to believe, but Egypt was once a fully Christian country. Now less than 10% of that is Christian, and the Coptic Christians are under constant pressure. Will this Al-Jolani be an anti-Christian terrorist, as so many of his colleagues are? The astonishingly macabre snuff videos of ISIS terrorists beheading Christians when they found them. We'll find out quite quickly what Al-Jolani is like. What's been interesting from a political point of view is how quickly it all happened, and how quickly Iran's plans in the region have become undone. A year and a half ago, before the attack on Israel by Hamas, Iran seemed to be strong. But then with the Hamas attack on Israel, it unleashed an Israeli response that has decimated Gaza and Hamas. Israel then set its sights on Hezbollah in Lebanon. And with the fall of Bashar al-Assad, it seems like Iran's power in the region has been clipped, and Russia's too. I saw a video of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu standing in the northern border with Syria, exuberant. Here's a clip of how that looked.
This is a historic day for the Middle East. The collapse of the Assad regime, the tyranny in Damascus, offers great opportunity, but also is fraught with significant dangers. This collapse is a direct result of our forceful action against Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's main supporters. It set off a chain reaction of all those who want to free themselves from this tyranny and its oppression. But it also means we have to take action against possible threats. One of them is the collapse of the Separation of Forces Agreement from 1974 between Israel and Syria. This agreement held for 50 years. Last night it collapsed. The Syrian army abandoned its positions. We gave the Israeli army the order to take over these positions to ensure that no hostile force embeds itself right next to the border of Israel. This is a temporary defensive position until a suitable arrangement is found. Equally, we send a hand of peace to all those beyond our border in Syria, to the Druze, to the Kurds, to the Christians, and to the Muslims who want to live in peace with Israel. We're going to follow events very carefully. If we can establish neighborly relations and a peaceful relations with the new forces emerging in Syria. That's our desire. But if we do not, we'll do whatever it takes to defend the state of Israel and the border of Israel.
I suppose it's true that Iran has long been the greatest strategic threat to Israel in the region, and so having Iran knocked down to size a bit would be exhilarating for any Israeli leader. But I wonder if what is to come is even more dangerous. Israel has taken Mount Hermon inside Syria to stop any terrorists from setting up too close to the border. I don't know how long that will be able to continue for Israel to have a presence in a buffer zone in Syria. I don't know the outcome here. I put it to you that Netanyahu's exhilaration is premature and will not be long-lasting.